And then one more question that leads into the topic that I want to bring in this afternoon or this morning. Could journaling about our daily life practice be of any use? And if so, how should we proceed? I do remember you referred to it in the document self-reporting during a prior retreat, but I'm still confused and find myself going in circles and often writing about the same kind of problem without any wholesome progress. So this, I'll just point to my website at this point, actually. Yosh, would you mind putting in the website into the chat? Thanks. On my website, I have a page for teachings. And on that page, there's a pretty close to the top of that page, there's a couple of documents, some written documents. One that provides this self-reporting information, and I'm going to talk about what reporting is, and I'm going to talk about that, and we're going to play with it. So this document is about self-reporting, but we're going to talk about reporting in general. So that's on my website, that document about self-reporting. It's a description about what might be useful in that area. And then another document that's there that I just want to point to is a set of written instructions about this practice. I have a 57-page PDF file that a number of people helped me to create after 2015 retreat. Somebody came to me and said, we think this should be written down. We want to transcribe these and put it into a document. So that happened. And, you know, it's in pretty good shape. It's reasonable enough. I wouldn't put it in a book yet, but it's good enough for PDF. And, you know, I actually recommend, if you want to read it, it's much easier to read in PDF form than it is to read online. So you might just print it out. I know it's a lot of paper, but I find with Dharma documents, you know, having it on paper and able to flip back and forth and go back to it has been really helpful for me. So that the instructions, the basic instructions for this practice are written down. And so for some of you, this may be a different way, a different modality for learning that can be helpful for you, the written form. So self-reporting. So journaling, yes, can be helpful, but again, it's going to be that the key piece here, I would say, around reporting is like we explored yesterday afternoon, and I know many of you couldn't be here yesterday afternoon, but encourage you to listen to the recording about reflective practice. In that session, we looked at bringing a thought into our mind and then noticing what happened as we brought that thought into our mind. You just bring just a little bit, you know, so some experience happened during your day and you bring that into your mind, and then, you know, you don't continue to think about it. You bring in awareness of what's happening now as a result of thinking about that experience. And so I'd say with journaling, it's very similar. You know, if you're working with journaling, I'd say you can write something and then notice how you are as you write that down, something that happened. So this is going in circles and writing about the same kind of problem. So, you know, I think that's because you're writing about the content more than perhaps noticing what's happening as you write the content. So there's two things you could explore here. One would be in journaling to let it be a very slow process. Just write down, here's what happened. And so for some people, that may be a way into that self-reflective practice that we explored yesterday. Rather than closing your eyes and trying to create an image in your mind, words on paper may be an easier way into bringing that in to your experience. And so write down what happened, and then put your pen down, and then notice what's happening now. What's going on? You know, what are you noticing? As you get more skill with the noticing what's going on, you could Another way to do the journaling would be to write something about what happened and then start writing about what you're experiencing in the present moment, kind of a stream of consciousness. What are you experiencing right now? That can also help you, perhaps for some, to kind of land with or connect with what's happening in the present moment. But I'd say potentially, based on the question, what's happening, since the you're finding yourself kind of going around in circles, it means that you're kind of in the words more than in the experience. And so, write a few words, write a sentence or two, and then stop and feel into how is it now, doing some of those practices from the reflective practice that we did yesterday afternoon. So this person, what you could do, perhaps go back to that reflective practice that was recorded yesterday. And instead of where I say, close your eyes and bring to mind a situation, instead you could write down the situation on paper. And then once that's been written down, then close your eyes and follow the rest of the guided meditation through noticing what's arisen in the present moment in relationship to that situation. So that's a little bit about, using journaling. And the self-reporting piece, the piece that I think really fits in here, is that we tend to think we're going to solve our problems by thinking through the content, bringing in all the details and who said what and what am I going to do and how am I going to respond. And, that is a way to navigate issues in our lives for sure. But again, this practice gives us different information. It gives us a different way into noticing what's going on, what's happening. And so the encouragement around working with things that are coming up, in our meditation practice, working with describing what's happening, either to ourselves or to a teacher, is that, you don't need to go into all the detail. As we found out yesterday, for some of you, just a little bit of a memory is enough to evoke what's going on. And so, in terms of talking about or relating to understanding what's happening for us, a tiny bit of content is all that we need. So for instance, at one point, and this is the example I give in the document, I think, I don't have it in front of me, but in the self-reporting is practice, I point to this kind of curiosity around what happened today. It's like a little bit of the, the reflective practice in brief. What happened today? Oh, that person, did that thing. And when I had a response to them, I realized there was an overreaction and I got embarrassed. I felt embarrassed. And so as I kind of, it's like, okay, I looked at that. And then as I started exploring that and reflecting on that person, bringing that person to mind, feeling of the embarrassment, the feeling of that, it's like, oh, this happens a lot with this person. So kind of noticing that this is a pattern, and the feeling became familiar. It's like, oh yeah, this is a feeling that happens a lot with this person. And what that did then was to create some interest in my future interactions with that person and how that might be coming up. So it was just a little reflection I did. It took maybe 5 minutes, kind of almost as a self-reporting to myself, like what happened today around the situation, what happened, and how would I describe this to a teacher? What arose? How would I describe this if I was describing this to a teacher? And in describing something to a teacher, like when I'm offering practice discussions in groups, I often suggest a little bit of context can be helpful. So just what I said there, it's like, with this person, I noticed that I did something that created embarrassment. And then I noticed that, wow, that seems to be something that's coming up a lot. And here's how I explored this. Here's what I noticed. Here's what I noticed about the embarrassment. And so the emphasis in the reporting is on not what happened, not the content of the experience, not the story so much. Although, as I said, a tiny bit of story context can be helpful. You just have to be careful not to get too far into it. It's so easy in describing, oh yeah, this situation happened, and to go into the details of what they did and why, justifying yourself or why it was the right thing to do. It's like none of that is necessary. What we're interested in exploring is what was coming up. What is the arising feeling, emotion, beliefs, ideas? What was arising there? And so in reporting experience, and this I think useful in particularly in the practice groups with Dawn, to take some care about in describing your experience, just enough context to um, give a sense of the flavor. I mean, it's useful to know, for instance, yeah, I'm working with a long-standing pattern with a partner that creates a lot of frustration in my mind. We don't need to know what the pattern is. We don't need to know details about what the partner does, how they leave the garbage out without putting it away. We don't need to know that. That's not relevant. And actually, what it tends to do when you go into the story is to pull you into the reactivity again. And so this practice of reporting, it's not just about saving time and also privacy for that matter. I mean, you can report a lot about very intimate things without being very revealing. It's protective of privacy in a way. And so there's you can describe just a little bit, and if you just go that far and then come back to, and here's how I was, that itself right in the moment is bringing you back to the practice. It's bringing you back to what was going on. What did I notice? And in a way, sometimes we can retrospectively notice things that we didn't clearly notice at the time. And so that's an interesting piece, is that this practice of reporting, both to a teacher or to ourselves, can help us to see something that we might not have seen. And I noticed this when I first started creating reports for Sayadaw U Pandita, when I was very first in Burma. He had a very strict way of having us report. And any description of content of our mind, at one point, I even said just one sentence about what was going on in my mind. And he got up and started walking around the room. And, he came back to his seat and just said to me, don't report the content of your thoughts. It's like, okay. And it's like, I went back, and it's like, how could I have reported that without giving him the thought? And so it created that kind of what would have expressed it in a different way? What would have expressed it? And so what I had described was a thought of doubt. I had described, what I was doubting in my thought. And I could have said, a thought of doubt arose. And I noticed this followed when I noticed that thought of doubt. So that was more what U Pandita wanted. I don't tend to go that far in my practice discussions of telling people you don't report the content of your thoughts. But it's a very interesting exercise, because I found, as I thought through my experience, and thought through what would I say to Sayadaw U Pandita about what I've been noticing, I began to hear how he would respond. I began to hear him say, like as I reported, as I thought about this, it's like, oh, actually, I noticed this happened. I can know in retrospect that this happened, but I didn't see it happening in the moment. So I began to see where the holes were in my mindfulness through this kind of process of thinking back on my experience to describe it to him. So this self-reporting can be a way that we can become our own teacher, a way that we can begin to learn from our experience, and bringing in the Dharma perspective. There's a lot of wisdom you already have. So this kind of self-reporting can make that wisdom kind of come alive. Dawn, do you want to add anything about this? And I'm going to spotlight you, so you might want to hide self-view.
Interestingly enough, hide self-view didn't work.
Okay.
So I don't have a lot to add, except to maybe just one more encouragement in this direction is I noticed for myself over the trajectory of my practice that returning to this process that Andrea is describing of noticing the relationship with what's happening more than focusing on the content, noticing how the body is, how the emotions are, views, ideas, as processes in the moment, actually has helped to shape the mind and the heart in really beneficial ways. It matures the practice, just the act of doing it. And so that alone has begun to, and at this point has completely transformed my journaling practice from one of detailed content to one of much more about the practice itself. And can get a lot further along in a practice discussion moving in this direction.
Thanks, Dawn.